how the technology industry is silencing dissent, Nvidia launches an enterprise AI agent platform, and the cloud ERP reality check that every leader needs. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 266 of Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you.
3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control episode number 266. My name is Eric Kimberlin, here with Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this episode today.
Yes, fun episode 266. We're going to talk about all things related to digital transformation. For those that haven't joined this podcast before, this is the tech agnostic podcast that covers strategy, people, process, technology, all the stuff you need to know to make your digital transformation successful. Whether you're a end customer or a consultant or a vendor or sales rep, wherever you fit in the tech space, this podcast is for you. We're going to start off today's conversation with some questions we've received on social media. We're also going to get into some newsworthy topics around one being Nvidia launching its enterprise AI agent platform. And then we're also going to talk about a SaaS apocalypse for the SaaS industry. Let's put it that way, because I can't quite pronounce the word the way it is, but it's an apocalypse for the SaaS industry, or is it a structural shift? We'll talk about that here in the newsworthy segments. And then later in the show, we'll have Emma Roloff join the conversation. She's going to join us to talk about how she and I are both being silenced, along with other people that don't toe the company line of what tech vendors want you to hear. But we're going to talk about what the tech industry doesn't want you to hear, but what you do need to hear in order to be successful. So we'll have Emma on the show for a fun conversation around that. And then later in the show, we'll talk about the cloud ERP reality check that every leader needs. So all that being said, before we get to all that, Darian, what are some of the questions we've received on social media here recently?
Yeah, we have a good couple questions to go over today. This first one is actually from an X post you did, Eric. And this was talking about how you said organizations are unknowingly impacting their long-term future by moving to standard public cloud environments. And the question with this was, what are the specific long-term risks that companies miss before they migrate? And for those who have already moved, is it too late to course correct?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. So if you've already moved to the cloud or you've moved to some vanilla software, it's never too late to course correct. It can be difficult. It can be, in some cases, it can affect morale. It can be demoralizing to people internally. It can raise a lot of eyebrows and questions of why you might be doing that. But that risk is probably less significant than the potential risk of long-term business damage. And, a lot of times when we're talking about technology, we don't talk about the fact that it might actually harm your business more than it helps. That's something that, we're going to get to later in the show when we talk about what are the inconvenient truths of the technology space. And one of the things that are sort of not faux pas, but what's the word? Blasphemy. One of the things that some would consider blasphemy to say out loud that you shouldn't say out loud is the fact that technology could actually hurt you more than it helps in some cases. And so I think if that's the case, then you have no choice but to course correct and to go a different direction. The first part of the question, though, is what was the first part is about what are some specific examples of how
long-term risks and stuff like that before they migrate.
Yeah, I think, there's a few long-term risks to be aware of when you migrate, especially if you're migrating to a cloud solution, a vanilla off-the-shelf cloud solution. Some of the risks would include things like now all the data is being housed by someone else. And, the risk may be more significant if you were hosting that stuff yourself. If you're hosting your data in-house, that could be a risk because you don't have professional or a software vendor with tons of R&D dollars investing in cybersecurity and things of that nature. So some would argue, well, moving to a cloud solution is actually reducing risk, but now you've just shifted the risk to another provider. We've seen in recent months pretty significant cloud outages from very large and well-known, well-respected hyperscalers. So the fact, or the common refrain up until recently was, oh, it's more secure, it's more stable, it's less likely to get hacked. It's turning out that may not be true. It's actually more likely that you might have an outage. You're more likely to have a bullseye on you if you're a hyperscaler, in terms of potential cybersecurity attacks. So there are risks associated with that, but it is a risk. I mean, you've got to look at the risk of moving all our data to another third party. You've moved all your applications and your operations to a third party. Now that third party, AKA the software vendor, when they do an upgrade, they change the software. They're not necessarily changing the software to optimize for you. They're optimizing the software to optimize it for the masses. And so, and most importantly, for their own profitability. So now you've given up control, you ceded control, you don't have as much control or influence over your own operations. That's a huge risk that people don't want to talk about, don't want to acknowledge, but it is a very real one. And then the other one that's, I'd say that probably the biggest one is the fact that now we've moved from a model where companies had built their own internal intellectual property in the form of customization. And instead of recognizing the value of that customization, what the software industry has done is they've labeled that customization as technical debt. Therefore, it's a bad thing that needs to be eliminated. But in the quest to eliminate customization, what we're also doing is we are eliminating our competitive advantage, those unique factors that make us different, make us better, make us compete better in the industry we're in. Now we've ceded that competitive advantage. Now we've gone with a vanilla solution that can be accessed by any other company in your industry and other industries as well. So you've really watered down your competitive advantage in many cases. And now a lot of software vendors will say, no, you've got it all wrong, Eric. Customization is bad because that's just resistance to change. People resisted the change. So therefore, they customized their old software to fit their business. They didn't use best practices, which we have best practices in our software. That's what you should be doing. Well, they're not best practices, because if they were best practices, they wouldn't be built in your software, because not everyone would have access to those best practices. Otherwise, they wouldn't be best practices. So there's a lot of there's a nuance there that oftentimes gets lost, and I think that's a big risk for organizations going to an ERP or a cloud migration.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, our next question today I found super interesting as well. It's about how SAP, Salesforce, and Oracle, all these big software vendors, are deploying their AI agents into their core platforms. I know that's something we've been talking about a lot, but the question is, at what point does too soon become now? And how does a practitioner tell the legitimate capability from a vendor playing the hype cycle?
That's a good question. And I think that's the cycle we're in right now, is we're being sold a roadmap, essentially. We're being sold capabilities that aren't yet proven. And the best example is with AI. I mean, because a lot of AI capabilities are out there. I know SAP has said that they've got, I forgot how many thousands of AI agents they've already deployed in their core S/4HANA software. And that's good stuff, right? That's a ton of possibility, a ton of innovation goes into that, a ton of potential use cases go into that. But the problem is, where do we start, and what's reality? Like, what's really going to work? What's been proven at scale? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is not a lot has been proven at scale yet with AI, even within these big scalable solutions like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Workday, etc. So I think that's what you've got to do, is you've got to look, first of all, ideally identify specific use cases that other customers have deployed using that software. In the absence of that, you need to make sure that you're being very deliberate and clear about where you think you could get the most value from AI, because just deploying AI as a blanket statement isn't going to work. You've got to have specific ways that you're going to try it and test it and innovate it, manage it, govern it, all that stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Super interesting questions today, but I'm excited to get into our newsworthy articles, especially the SaaS apocalypse, or whatever, however you say that. But that is our first article of the day, so we're going to start there. The term SaaS apocalypse, I guess, has entered the mainstream financial and technology media. It started kind of in February 2026 and has continued on now in March 2026. But this happened after, it was kind of sparked by Anthropic's launch of Claude Cowork, which erased an estimated $285 billion in the SaaS market capitalization in just 48 hours. So some analysts put the broader market cap destruction in early 2026 closer to $2 trillion across the software sector. So the core argument isn't that the SaaS software breaks. It's the per seat pricing model underpinning 2 decades of SaaS growth is structurally threatened by AI agents that can execute the same work without requiring a human employee. So one of the most influential voices out there on SaaS investing, Jason Lemkin, he framed it as if 10 AI agents can do the work of 100 reps, you need 10 Salesforce seats, not 100, which then obviously reported its first decline in the enterprise seat counts in a very long time. So Salesforce stock is down 30% year to date, and both Salesforce and Adobe are now publicly pivoting towards outcome-based pricing models rather than the seat-based pricing models. And then the Databricks CEO added one more precise frame that SaaS isn't dead, but soon AI could make it irrelevant. And then overall, why this matters. So the SaaS apocalypse debate matters for ERP and digital transformation practitioners for a specific reason. ERP systems are fundamentally per seat or per module SaaS products, and the same pricing pressure now hitting Salesforce and Adobe applies directly to obviously SAP, Workday, Oracle, ServiceNow, all of the different software vendors. So if AI agents can execute the work inside the ERP system without a named user license, pulling data, generating reports, processing approvals, then the commercial relationship between enterprise and software vendors and their customers is being renegotiated in real time. The transition from seat-based to outcome-based pricing changes the ROI model for every ERP implementation currently in flight. If organizations end up paying per outcome rather than per license, the business case for large-scale digital transformation programs needs to be rebuilt, obviously, from the pricing structure. The threat is also structural. As one analyst noted, the products become invisible, like plumbing. Once the interface is just language and agents handle the execution, that invisibility is existential for companies whose differentiation is the user experience of their software. So Box CEO Aaron Levy represents the hybrid camp, so SaaS as a system of record, agents running on top. But then even in that scenario means fewer named users, fewer seats, and fundamentally different contract economics. For organizations making multi-year ERP commitments right now, the question isn't whether their vendor is affected by the SaaS apocalypse. It's whether the deal is being signed today, is priced for the world before AI agents or after, which I feel like is a very big topic. And there's a lot of different things going on in contract negotiation right now for these vendors and their clients, obviously. So I wanted to get your opinion on all of this, Eric, just first initial reaction, and then jump into some more specific questions.
Sure. Well, my initial reaction to this is that software vendors will find a way to make money, even if AI agents make it likely that their current pricing scheme becomes obsolete, because the user-based pricing now potentially actually decreases their revenue, because presumably you've got AI agents that are doing more work that would have historically been done by a dedicated user seat. If you have less employees, you're going to have less users. I know in the past, Oracle, as an example, and I think other vendors too, but I just remember Oracle in particular years ago, tried some pricing around enterprise-based pricing. So instead of number of users or seats, they were saying, we will just bill you, or you would be committing to a percentage of your SG&A cost, or your overall cost structure, your revenue. We might tie it to your company's revenue. That's how we determine your pricing. That's generally not well received by customers, because back then they were saying, hey, it's not just because of your software that our revenue is growing, so why would we pay you more just because our company is more successful? So that's the risk of outcome-based pricing, is that now you get into the discussion of, are those outcomes strictly because of the technology, and should we be tying the cost of our technology to the outcomes of the business, or should we be basing it on the outcomes of the technology itself? And so I think that's the big question. But I think the bigger question that comes to mind here, and the bigger red flag that I hear in all this, is the word renegotiate. I mean, everything's going to get renegotiated at the same time that a lot of companies are doubling down and getting themselves deeper into a vendor lock situation. So that's what you have to be really careful of, is that these pricing models are still in a state of flux. We don't know what enterprise technology pricing is going to look like in 5 to 10 years, yet organizations are making long-term commitments right now with the absence of information and clarity on what that pricing is going to look like going forward. So I think that's a good lesson for leaders here, is to, first of all, to understand that fact. And second of all, to figure out what do we need to do to navigate the risks, knowing that we can't sit still necessarily. We're not just going to sit on our old technology because we don't want to deal with uncertainty, but we need to manage that uncertainty and know that perhaps it's not the best idea to double down on one cloud software provider right now to where we get locked in and we have no choice but to renegotiate. At that point, you've lost all your leverage. So I think that's what organizations need to think about. And that's probably the biggest risk they face right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I found really interesting while reading, I mean, this was many articles, right, that have been out saying these different things and claiming different opinions about the SaaS apocalypse. But one thing I found really interesting was when the Databricks CEO said SaaS isn't dead, but soon AI will make it irrelevant. What does irrelevant mean in the ERP context? Where does the system of record still exist for compliance, audit, governance, all those different things if ERP is irrelevant?
Yeah, that's an interesting debate that's happening right now in the industry. Is, will ERP and SaaS be relegated to just be a system of record? In other words, a semi-glorified database. It's housing transactions, it's housing data and information, but the real work, the real value is being handled by the layer on top, which is the AI agents. And I think that's probably where we're headed. I think that is what ERP will become. I don't think that ERP and AI are going to coexist on an even playing field, if that makes sense. It's more, I think ERP is going to do what it does well, which is structure, data, workflows, just basic vanilla workflows. But when you get into all the value add stuff within an organization, whether it's decision making, analytics, analyzing information, whatever the case may be, that's where AI, agentic AI, generative AI, all that stuff sitting on top of that system of record is where the value is going to be. Now, the big question is going to be who's going to provide those AI tools. Is it, or should it be the same vendor that's providing your system of record, or is there some value in having a third party do it? There's a ton of variables that go into that. There's a ton of trade-offs. So there's no one clear answer to that. Everyone's going to arrive at a different conclusion, but those are some of the things that need to be looked at objectively as part of your overall roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question, kind of building on that, the Box CEO view is that the SaaS is as infrastructure, agents as interface, kind of like you were saying. If that's the likely outcome, that agents are the interface and that the SaaS is just the infrastructure, what changes in how organizations select ERP? Do you now evaluate the AI agent ecosystem around the system rather than the system itself?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. It's something we're facing real time with our selection clients. I think, yes, you do need to look at the ERP system itself, the workflows, the functions, the features, the fit with your business operations, but you also want to look at the emerging and changing capabilities of AI, knowing that that's a moving target, knowing that what you select today versus what you actually implement in 1, 2, 3 years from now, once you go live on a new technology, things are going to change exponentially between now and then. So all you can really do is base it on some of that core functionality, that system of record sorts of needs that you have on the ERP side. And then, yes, you want to evaluate AI capabilities, but know that what you see today is going to be the worst it's going to be. It's going to continue to get better. It's going to continue to evolve and advance, presumably. So I think the bigger question is going to be, I wouldn't get so hung up on, do they have, does this vendor have a specific AI agent or use case that can handle A, B, or C? But instead, what I would do is say, which one is going to provide the best platform for me to deploy unknown AI possibilities in the future? And the ones that I think are going to be best suited for that are the ones that not only have AI agents built within their own technology, but ones that can play nice with other systems, because I think that's where the real value is recognizing the composable ERP and best of breed and all that stuff is going to continue to probably be the wave of the future. So knowing that I've got an ERP system with AI tools that can manage the fact that I'm probably going to live in a multi-technology environment in the future, that's what I need to know. I've got the flexibility to do that going forward. So that's a little bit different than a list of checklist requirements that we might have historically focused on. And you still do some of that, but now you've got to add this other layer of looking at the intangible qualitative stuff that are you want to make sure is synced up with your long-term vision and strategy as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting there. I'm sure we'll hear more about this SaaS apocalypse as it develops over time. But I want to get into the next newsworthy article of the day. Speaking of AI agents, we're going to talk about how Nvidia launched their open enterprise AI agent platform. So at GTC 2026 in San Jose on March 16th, Nvidia unveiled its agent toolkit, an open source platform providing an infrastructure for enterprises and developers to build and deploy autonomous AI agents at scale. So 17 major enterprise software vendors, including SAP, Salesforce, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Box, more to be listed there. NVIDIA's OpenShell runtime enforces policy-based security and privacy guardrails to make agent deployment safer in enterprise environments. So it's included in a lot of different software vendors, obviously, but why this matters is because NVIDIA's agent toolkit represents a structural shift. Rather than AI being a feature layered onto individual enterprise applications, NVIDIA is positioning itself as a foundational infrastructure layer for autonomous agents across the enterprise software stack. SAP is using the toolkit to power Joule Studio on SAP Business Technology Platform, which is its agentic AI development environment, enabling customers and partners to build custom agents. Salesforce is embedding it into Agentforce for sales, service, and marketing automation, with Slack as the primary conversational interface for agent orchestration. The 17 partner coalition means organizations running multiple enterprise platforms may find their AI agents operating on a shared underlying architecture, which could reduce interoperability friction. NVIDIA's AI Q hybrid architecture reportedly cuts AI queries by more than 50% while maintaining accuracy, directly addressing one of the primary enterprise adoption barriers, cost per transaction. Oracle separately announced it's raising 40 to 50 billion in 2026 to expand its AI data center infrastructure, indicating that infrastructure race is to support agentic workloads at enterprise scale is accelerating across all major ERP players simultaneously. So I know that was kind of a lot of different information there, Eric, but overall, I just want to get your opinion and then ask some more specific questions after that too.
Yeah, I think it's smart of NVIDIA to do this. I mean, I think being able to have a infrastructure partner that can scale up these needs and these capabilities that the software vendors have is something that's going to be very powerful. And that is, I think you use the term, the arms race that vendors are facing is how do we build out these processing capabilities fast enough to handle all these demands for computing as a result of AI, the growth of AI. So I think it's smart that NVIDIA is doing it. I think it's something that's needed, and I'll be curious to see how they and other hyperscalers and infrastructure providers are able to stay on top of that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that this is the beginning of an actual open standard for enterprise AI agents, or is NVIDIA doing what AWS did to SaaS companies a decade ago, locking vendors into infrastructure under a banner of open source?
Ooh, that's interesting, actually. So now it's like the vendor lockers are getting locked in by a different vendor. So it's sort of like they're getting fighting with fire or getting a taste of their own medicine or whatever. I hadn't thought of that, honestly. So that could be what's happening. It would make sense that NVIDIA would want to lock in or, become somewhat of a standard that other vendors hitch onto, and then it becomes harder to move away from that NVIDIA infrastructure. So I suspect that's probably what's happening because NVIDIA is obviously a very successful company, and they can become even more successful by getting these big, large tech providers to lock into their infrastructure and their platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting there. My other question is, if SAP and Salesforce are both building agents on the same NVIDIA toolkit, does that change the integration story between ERP and CRM? And does shared infrastructure make true system convergence more realistic?
I suppose it could. I don't think at the core underlying technology level it does, but it could at the agentic, at the AI potential integration level. I was actually where I thought you were going to go with that question, which led me to another observation or question was, does that mean now that software vendors become more homogeneous because now they're using the same platform, they're using the same infrastructure for AI and hosting their solutions and all that stuff? Does that start to water down or dilute the differences between software vendors? And is that sustainable? Because I've always talked about how customers, it's not sustainable for software vendors to expect that all customers are going to become vanilla and use the software the same way in the spirit of moving to the cloud and getting more SaaS licensing and more SaaS ARR recurring revenue. Now that makes me wonder if the same thing might be happening to the software vendors. Are they now at risk of becoming homogeneous or too much alike if they're sharing the same infrastructure, the same AI agent platform, all that stuff? And I think that in the short term, it's probably going to be a great idea, but I think longer term, it creates more opportunity for some software vendors to do something different. It's just going to open up markets. It's going to open up differentiating providers that maybe are doing something different that makes them more unique, that gives them a unique niche or whatever it is. So I think that's the beauty of where we're at, is like technology. The big tech providers are going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to scale. But as they do that and they try to become more like everything to everyone, it's going to create more openings for people that are more niche, more focused, that sort of thing. So it's the beauty of capitalism, I suppose. It's always changing. It's like an organism that never is settled. And so we're always going to see new opportunities and new technologies that come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting articles I found today. I found them super interesting, at least. But I'm excited to get into the conversation with Emma.
Yes. Yeah. This is a conversation that I'm excited to have too. It was sparked by a common situation that she and I both have experienced recently, where there have been attempts to silence our voices and silence our content. And both of us are, both Emma and I are not affiliated with software vendors. And that gives us a certain amount of freedom to talk openly about what's going on in the industry. And not everyone likes it. So we're going to talk about what that means and why it's so important to understand this is because if you're a leader and a team member going through a digital transformation, you need to know the darker sides or the nuances or the downside risks of digital transformations. And so that's why we're going to talk about that here today. So stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
When the soul of the city was laid to rest and the night's forgotten.
If you're about to embark on the jungle of digital transformation, check out my new book, Welcome to the Jungle. It's a book that just came out in late 2025. It's my second book, and it's a book that focuses on digital transformation failure case studies and talks about the lessons and takeaways from that. It's 300 pages packed of all the lessons and things that I've learned from having been an expert witness in lawsuits related to digital transformations, and also with our team helping clients recover some of their failed projects. I've included as many lessons as I could possibly fit into one book here. You can read this book. You can order it anywhere in the world in hard copy format, which is this format here. You can get it in paperback. You can also get it electronically as well. Scan the QR code right here or go to the links below for your copy. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Born of a battle from heaven's hand, and now you know. And here I
Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 266. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech agnostic consulting provider of digital transformation advisory services. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. So if you'd like to collaborate with us on our content, be sure to reach out to us. I've included contact information for Major Tom below. And our next guest is Emma Roloff from Roloff Consulting. She's been on the show a number of times, primarily talking about change management type stuff, people first strategies, defining executive strategies, and getting aligned as a team. A lot of the people side of change people side of transformation is what she has historically talked about on the show and in her thought leadership that she puts out on YouTube and TikTok, Instagram, and other outlets. However, today she's going to be on the show, and we're going to talk about something different. It's going to be the one of the dark sides of the technology industry, in that there is oftentimes a tendency to fall into this pattern of groupthink and not really respecting or listening to voices of dissent or counterpoints to the common industry narrative. And she and I have both seen some of the dark side consequences of that in the form of attempts, some successful, some not, attempts to censor or silence some of the content that we create. So we want to talk about that dark side here today, but not only to commiserate with each other, but more importantly, to share with the community what it is that how this happens behind the scenes. First of all, why software vendors and system integrators, big four consultancies don't want you to hear some of the things that we share. But more importantly, what are you going to do about it? How can you navigate? How can you shine a light on the things you need to know before you go into a transformation project? Because let's face it, transformations are risky. There's a ton of potential pitfalls and risks, and we can either hide from that fact or we can accept it and say they're risks. We need to know where they are so that we don't step on those landmines. And that's the approach we typically take. But the industry has historically not valued that way of thinking. So we want to try to bridge that gap here today. So with that all being said, Emma, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. When you said the deep, dark underbelly, I immediately went to that ice skating scandal from back in the day where the girl was walking, which Tanya Harding.
Tanya Harding and
yeah, hopefully we don't ever reach that point right now. We're just talking about videos getting taken down, but immediately my brain went to the 90s correlation there.
Yeah, or I always think about the conspiracy theorists, when I'm talking about this topic, especially in the 2020s, there's, all the debate about conspiracy theories and fake news and stuff like that. That's where my mind goes to is thinking about that. But before I get into all the dark underbelly stuff that I want to ask you, first of all, I have to maybe just have you back up for a second, introduce yourself for those that don't know you, and
that's
tell us
helpful.
About
I dove right into where the association went in my brain. Hi, everybody. My name is Emma Roloff. I'm the co-founder of Roloff Consulting, and we help companies really hone in on how to use their digital presence to get out into the marketplace and educate people as a way of driving business. And a lot of times that is tied to how you see your vision internally, how you're communicating that with your team, how you're leading inside the organization so that it allows you to then go out and lead externally in the marketplace. And I talk a lot about that concept of digital leadership and what that looks like both inside a company and outside. And then for the context of this conversation, my experience has come from 10 years plus now. I'm getting older, over a decade in the enterprise technology space. And similar to Eric, I create a lot of content about transformations and this concept of digital leadership on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and LinkedIn. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about that content creation journey and maybe how we push some boundaries there.
Yeah, and that's how you and I met, actually, is by engaging with each other's content. I think it was on TikTok at first.
Sounds right, yeah.
And so over the years, we've just gotten to know each other as collaborators in social media, but also other stuff that we've done.
Yeah.
And so you and I have had conversations in the past about people first, and you talk a lot about change management. That's actually what drew me to your content, was the fact that you talk about change management, the people first aspect, don't lead with technology, know your why, all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that you and I share in common with how we view the world. But what triggered this conversation is a little bit different, because
it was an angry text message from me a couple of weeks ago, Eric. You could air it.
Emma was freaking out. You sent me a text message. It was kind of late at night. It wasn't like during business hours. It was like,
it was at like 5 or 6 in the afternoon. Yeah. So
Yes.
a couple of weeks ago, so for context, I had created kind of like a corporate skit video poking fun at a massive ERP failure that was implemented by, let's call them Deloitte. And I had done this video specifically because I had gotten multiple comments from people talking about this. So like, Eric, you do a ton of content tied to like ERP failures and like that, like really great case study content on that. And typically I don't touch a lot of those specific stories. And I tend to stay a little bit more in like vague land, kind of to avoid this type of situation. But I had gotten multiple comments. Oh, we've got James Guten Morganen back to our guest from Munich in the comments there. But I had gotten a bunch of comments to make a video on this specific ERP failure that was making a lot of headlines and was getting a lot of attention. And so I was like, you know what? Fine, I'll do it. There's enough like press around this one where I can make sure that the stuff I'm saying is only stuff that's coming from news articles that were published about it. I can make sure that like I'm poking fun at it, but not like I didn't have firsthand account knowledge to it. So everything I got was from news stories and news coverage that already existed about this failure. I made the video. It was pretty successful on both Instagram and TikTok, getting a couple 100,000 views across both platforms. And there were a lot of people coming into the comments talking about their experience with the software platform, as well as the Big Four consulting firm that had done the implementation. And it's like, oh, well, there you go. Clearly I gave people what they wanted. They're like, they're engaging with this video, and I went about my business. And, then the day that I texted you, I had gone on to Instagram. Now, I've never had this happen on Instagram before. And so it was like a new experience. I popped in and it was like, your video's been taken down for copyright infringement. And I was like, what the? So I clicked into it, and I have had videos like taken off of the For You page on TikTok, where stuff has been like basically not being suggested through the algorithm for people that aren't on TikTok and don't know what that means. And you can go through an appeal process to basically be like, this is content that I created. Or I've had stuff like speaking clips get flagged before because they're high quality video and they think I've taken it from somewhere else. And like, nope, this is me speaking. Like, I've gone through that that appeal process a couple of times. So I didn't think too much of it. And then I went in to go appeal this video on Instagram, and it brought me to a screen where it said like, you can start by trying to talk directly to the copyright holder about this. And it brought up a screen that showed me that it was a crisis PR firm that had claimed I had used copyrighted information, which the consulting company's name was on the screen. So like maybe just because I typed their name onto the screen, but it was also in the comment that someone else had left. But it was like saying specifically what firm it was, what email address it came from, and who it was on behalf of. So I know that it was a crisis PR firm for this consulting company. And the part that's frustrating to me is like, one, I didn't use any copyrighted information. And two, their logo wasn't even in it. It was literally just typeface of the name of the company. And the part that's frustrating to me is I didn't say anything that doesn't already have news coverage.
Right.
But these
info.
Yeah, exactly. But these PR firms know if they claim copyright infringement that the platforms will take it down because they don't want to have copyright information and get tied up in that. And then when I went to go appeal it to say this is not copyrighted information through the normal mechanism, the form was broken on Meta's website. So I couldn't like actually even go through the process of appealing it. So my petty self went and redacted information and bleeped out the names and reposted the video. But I was like,
the second time, like the second time you posted.
What was that, Eric?
How did the video perform the second time? Did it do as well as the first one?
No, because there wasn't, I mean, like the people that had seen the comment, like the video that I made talking about the fact that it got down, like was taken down, engaged with it. But I think like the part that's interesting to me is that they think that stops the conversation. And but like they can't go, like the PR firm is taking down individual creators that are talking about this, but like there's news coverage about it. And I wouldn't have known the details that were in my video had you not made the mistake and had it not gotten put out there. And like I'm never one to believe that like my content is being censored and like putting on my tinfoil hat that like my views are being impacted by that kind of stuff. But when I had it point blank laid out in front of me, I took a screenshot and I sent it to you and I was like, Eric, has this ever happened to you? Because this is a new one for me. Yeah. And I know you obviously have your own experience with a similar situation as well.
Well, yeah, what's interesting though is like when you sent that, I thought this is really weird because I've posted stuff about that same case study. And in fact, I just reposted it today. And this morning before this this
is one final little jab.
Yeah, well, I knew we were going to be talking about this topic in general, but I did post a LinkedIn newsletter that I had done on this exact case study. But I was actually surprised to see that because I know you have a big following. But I would say if you and I were competing, I probably rip on the industry more than you do. And so the fact that you're the one that got called out, especially maybe it's because you know most of your content is, we were talking before we went live here about how most of your content is so positive. So maybe when you talk about something like this, it's more jarring to people. I don't know, but
I'm not sure. Maybe it was because I like pretended to be a consultant from that firm that it like really gave them like, they're like, ooh, this one's really bad.
Yeah. And so I guess, you know, the reason we want to have this discussion here today is because it's interesting. And B, I think that it's important to talk about, and I'd love to hear the audience's take on this, is the importance of transparency in this industry. I think that's something that it drives me absolutely insane in this industry about how we, when I say we, I don't mean you and I, we as an industry tend to stick our heads in the sand and assume the best, assume all is great, assume that technology is amazing and AI first driven strategies are always going to succeed. And, you know, you and I are out there saying, no, hold on. It's not the technology. It's the people, it's the process, it's the strategy, it's the alignment, all that other stuff. But I'd love to hear from the audience, like how important is transparency? Is this okay? Like if you're especially if you're a consultant or a vendor or a sales rep for a vendor, I'd love to hear these people's thoughts in more than anyone, because I know you've been on that side of the table, Emma, selling software. And I know you and I have had similar moral dilemmas. You know, both, I came from the Big Four consulting side of things. You came from the sales side of things. We both had that experience with, call it the dark side. Don't sue me, Big Four consulting firms, for saying that. It's dark side. I hope the attorneys aren't listening right now. But I think that I would love to hear from the audience, though. How important is transparency? Or is this okay? Is it okay to get censored, to get canceled, to get silenced, whatever the case may be? And that's really why we want to have this conversation. What are your thoughts on this? Like, what do you think? Is this a symptom of something bigger than this one post that you put out there? Or what are your thoughts?
I think there is a general sentiment that technology is a magic solution. And everyone always talks about like whether it's the easy button. A friend Andreas Welsh, who does a lot of AI content, and he has like an easy button on the side that he uses to like joke about the same concept. And I think that this ultimately comes back to like, if people are honest about these experiences, it makes there be friction in the belief that magic exists in the capacity of how we sell technology. And so that like narrative of you have to pay attention to the hard, sticky people side of this, and you need to be intentional with the way that you implement tools, doesn't go along with the narrative of hire us. We'll take care of it all. Don't worry about it. And I think that mentality is ultimately what is like driving wanting to not talk about these failures. And I mean, look, any company has had a bad experience with a client or a horror story that they wouldn't want splashed all over the place. But I think that the biggest like piece here, when we look specifically at the big four consulting firms or these technology implementations, and Eric, you and I were talking about this before we went live, this isn't the minority experience. And that's the problem, is that it's a shared experience with literally millions of people around the world that for some reason can't be talked about, or is like heavily not talked about in the rooms where maybe it matters most for those conversations to be happening. And I think that's the problem. No company is perfect. I'm not against all consultants. I'm against the thought process that technology alone can solve all of our problems. And when we go down that path, there's massive failures, and we've all been collateral damage to that at least one point in our careers, if you're tied to technology at all. So why don't we talk about that, I think, is the bigger question in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not because we want to necessarily be negative Nellies or Debbie Downers. It's because like learning the lessons of the mistakes others have made. And one question that people ask me a lot on social media is, Eric, you've been talking about this for a long time. You've been doing this for a long time. Has anything changed in the 25 to 30 years I've been doing it? And the answer is no, it hasn't. And that's why we have to keep talking about it. It's like, why does a failure from 1998 when I started my career, why does it look so similar to a failure in 2026? Like, why are we doing the same thing?
You just like take the technology and you swap it out with the next Lego.
Yeah. Instead of JD Edwards or mainframe client server or whatever, now you're just inserting AI tool or cloud vendor name here. And a lot of times, back to the be careful who I mention here, but one of the commonalities over 25 years is the big four consulting firm. So I'm not saying they're the only reason they fail and they're the only reason these patterns perpetuate, but the silencing mentality doesn't help. Because if people don't want to hear it, if people think you're full of it or I'm full of it, then they won't listen to or watch our stuff. The problem is they're listening to and watching our stuff.
Well, and I think so, like in the comments, Doug talked about, like as a thought leader who is someone that people like look up to, you kind of become a target in that scenario, and that the crisis PR firms are going to go out. They can't get at ABC. I don't know if that was one of the sources off the top of my head, but they can't get major news outlets to take down a story, but they can really quickly, say that I used copyrighted information and get my video taken down. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not like a huge deal to even me as a creator to have one video taken down. But if you do decide to go hard on this and continue to go with it, and they decide to target you, you could get channels taken away that provide monetization or give you your reach, or for me, opportunities to speak on stages and that kind of thing. But I think the other part of this is that, like, when you do talk about it, you give other space, or give other people, especially on social media, space to share their experiences. And I think that's probably the more scary part than anything. Like, if a news outlet does a story, yeah, maybe people will share it. Maybe someone will grab it and post it on their LinkedIn feed and say, oh my gosh, have you seen this? But when you create a video that gets people commenting about their specific experience, because let me tell you, in that video, the comments in there, 7-year implementation, still not like, just like lists of all of the horror stories that you and I have seen and heard about in our career. And I know, like, Doug personally probably has seen a lot of that experience as well. When other people start to pile on, it becomes very clear that this is not a one-time situation. Like, the news might portray like, oh man, this was a really bad implementation. It impacted this public company really significantly. Their stock suffered because of it. How sad. But then when you're on social media, and then all of a sudden it's all these other people coming in and being like, yeah, and you haven't even heard what happened at our company. Right. Then it becomes very clear how pervasive the issue is, as opposed to it being this one-off situation where there was an article written about it.
Yeah, totally. And, in some ways, people like you are more dangerous than a news outlet, because your content's a lot more likely to go viral. And in some ways you might be your content reaches more than a lot of mainstream news outlets. And, but even then, the news outlet stuff is the mainstream stuff is more contained and more.
Well, and beyond that, the mainstream outlets are like hitting my father-in-law, who's like retired and going fishing after he watches the video. My content's going directly to people that are living through these experiences because the algorithm is serving it to the right audience. So it's not only like reaching a large audience, but it's hitting like laser targeted on people that are experiencing this and giving them a spot to talk about it, which I do think for a company like that could be a lot more dangerous from a reputation standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear though from the audience. What do you think about all this stuff? The transparency, crisis management. How do we manage this whole need to be transparent, but also the vendors need to control the narrative from their perspective? I'm curious to hear the thoughts here. I also want to go to the audience. Darian on LinkedIn says hello, or good morning, I should say. Emilio is on LinkedIn joining from Munich. Thank you for being here today, Emilio. You mentioned James Roloff, Guten Morgen from Wisconsin. I thought he was British. I thought he was an old British dude, not a German.
No, he's very German. Well, German and British, but British sense of humor, German.
His humor is British.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Doug on LinkedIn had some good comments here. Crisis teams fight the fires they can touch and denounce the ones they can't. As a thought leader and someone who people listen to, we become targets. And I think that's well said. And then here's another comment follow-up from Doug says, why do things not change? The thing I would love to talk to, yet it would be seen adversely, is the Clay-Shirky principle. Institutions will try to preserve the problem to which they are or think they are the solution. Very interesting.
So I think you, so yesterday I made a post called "If You Give an Executive a Shiny Object."
Oh, is that the book?
I wish I had just put it into the closet. If we weren't live, I would like run and go get it and bring it because I physically made the book as like a little arts and crafts project for myself. Go to my profile. Cool, it's there. What was that?
Sorry to interrupt you, but that was super cool. I actually saw it last night right before I went to sleep. I was like just flipping through Instagram and that came up. I'm like, that's a really good video because it's you you're flipping through a book that you changed the story.
Yes. So I have the If You Give a Mouse a Cookie book, but I adapted it to If You Give an Executive a Shiny Object. And I have to give credit to, I saw somebody else do this tied to like data science and like that concept. And after that, I was like, I have to make one. This is how ideas content work with me. Once it's there, until it has like seen the light of day, it doesn't go away. And so I got out like paper and tape and like recreated this book. But Doug, it's like perfectly aligned to this principle that you just mentioned. And like I was saying, you give somebody you give an executive who is maybe stuck in like what I call the FOMO cycle, which is like, you hear from a technology company, you have to adapt or die. So let's use AI as the example. You absolutely need to be using AI or you're going to be out of business in 5 years. Or all of your competitors are going to replace all of their people in 18 months. Fill in the blank with whatever we're hearing from the CEOs that are selling these solutions. And that creates fear. And that creates fear of missing out, but also fear of becoming irrelevant, right? And that makes people move quick. And it makes them go out and seek shiny objects. And the joke within the book that I made was like, you go out, you seek a shiny object. Well, once you've given them a shiny object, they're going to need a Big Four consultant to help them implement it. Right. And going through the whole story of then and they're going to want to do it fast. And then they're going to implement fast because of this fear that's associated with it. And when they move fast, things are going to get missed. And then there's going to be change orders and then change management and training and all of the other things that we know are important on the people side of change that you brought up, Eric, all of a sudden get cut from the project. And then it's like, well, why isn't anybody using this? And then after all of that whole process, by the end, when you end up at the end, the book goes, he's going to get thirsty and he's going to want a glass of milk and he's going to ask for a cookie. But it's like, so they don't get the return that they're looking for. They're confused. It didn't give them the magic solution that they were expecting when they got so fearful at the beginning. So they're going to go out and they're going to start searching for another recommendation or something else to bring in to solve the problem. And they're going to go to the big four consulting companies and they're going to say, here's another shiny object. Go ahead and implement it. This one is going to solve all of your problems.
Yeah.
And like when you look at some of these relationships, like going back to the original video that I brought up, the company with this massive ERP failure had a 25-year relationship with the consulting company that did this.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing it for 25 years. Yeah. And now not every one of their implementations was as unsuccessful as the one that I was poking fun at, but they've had this long-standing relationship. And to your point, Doug, it doesn't change, because if you truly were able to unlock the full return and get all of the magical promises that were made to you, those companies would become irrelevant. And so implementing them in a way that's going to truly give you all of the return immediately, the moment that you start using that platform, goes against the incentive structures of those companies.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have, as a side note, I have a book that's coming out next month. It's called Welcome to the Machine. And it's, it talks about incentive structures. It talks about the systemic problems in the industry. And it touches on a lot of what you just described. But I think you're right. And what you just said is that's an inconvenient truth. You know, it's too bad you said that, because now it's out there and people know. And especially,
well, and it's too bad. And the irony of all of this is, like, Walker Reynolds. I was at his conference a couple of months ago, probably like a week before this video got taken down. When I took the stage there, I was like, I've come to terms with the fact that like big four consulting companies, and I named off a handful of software companies, are probably never going to hire me. Right. And it was before I even created this video naming names. And I said, because even if I don't name names, creating content in this way opens up a space for other people to name names. And my content section becomes like a dumping ground for bad experiences with software platforms and consulting companies. And then fast forward a week and they're taking down some of my content. And I'm like, did I manifest this?
I know,
I accidentally brought this into the world.
Yeah. You know, my first experience, it was actually right after I started Third Stage in 2018. I had posted an article, a blog. I don't even know if I put it on LinkedIn or not, but it was an article about the Hertz had a IT failure of some sort. And I posted it. And the day I posted it, I got this anonymous voicemail that I saved for years. I actually had it for years, and I'd play it for people just because it was so like weird and creepy, but entertaining. And it was just, I didn't know who it was. It was a blocked number, and it was a woman's voice. And she just said, I'll get as close as I can to the exact words. And it was this tone. And she said, Eric, I saw your article about Hertz. I would be careful if I were you. And then she just hung up. And I was like, am I in the mafia? Like, is this like, am I going to get abducted now, or someone going to kill me? Is there a hit out on me now because I posted this thing about Hertz? It was the most bizarre thing. So I saved that for years. And it just sort of like, it was a good reminder that like people don't like to talk about this stuff. And it goes back to your incentive structure thing, right? I actually have a friend who lives in our neighborhood who is a sales rep for one of the big software vendors. And he got really pissed at me one day, just recently, actually, just a couple months ago, sent me these nasty texts, all pissed off because I posted something about a public sector client failure. And he coincidentally the next day had a sales call with that client. He was trying to sell his software, which, by the way, it was his software that had failed 10 or 15 years ago. He's trying to sell an upgrade now. And he was pissed that I posted this. He's like, you got to take it down. What are you doing? It's not true. And I'm like, actually, it is true. I based it all on public information. If the public information's wrong, then, you might want to dispute with, the sources that I cite there. But he was super pissed off about it.
But the part is like, going back to what you said, like, you worked in a consulting firm. Now you did need to leave because there like obviously wasn't a way for you to necessarily push against those bounds. Right. But I will say, like, as a software sales rep, like, maybe I was incredibly spoiled, but like I did work in a company when I was with we were really more of a process consulting company that resold technology. So that did give me a little bit of like, I guess, like a spoiled nature to be able to start with people and process before we fully brought in the technology. But even with the incentives to sell a solution, I was still able to talk about the things that I knew stand in people's way and be able to be honest with people of like, hey, you know what? Like, we've got a really great product. We have a really good team to implement it. But when I see customers that are successful and I see companies that feel like they're spinning their wheels, it's this people side that falls onto you that, or like that we can help support, or I can get you in connection with people to support. But that is a piece of this puzzle that makes you successful. And when I did that and I helped customers figure that out, they came back to me and I didn't have to like fight against stuff. I could just be honest. So like in that scenario, instead of getting mad, like go in and be like, hey, I know it didn't go well last time. Tell me what you think went wrong and how do we avoid that? And what do we do to make sure that we're building this with integrity so that it gives you everything that I'm promising it will be? And I was good at my job. I made a lot of money selling software. Like, it's not like you have to, it's not an either or, it's just easier to pretend. And like, to like going back to like, can we ever fix this? There would still be plenty of work for you to do if you helped your customers be more successful with their outcomes. They'd keep coming back to you and they'd refer their friends to you. And then you become known as the person that's like the antithesis to this problem that we know is so pervasive. And like these firms could just do the stuff they say they're going to do in terms of supporting people and managing change, but they don't. And like, so it's so easy for us to not have this be the scenario anymore.
Yeah, I feel like the industry has been lying for so long that it just doesn't know any other way. You know, and I don't mean lying like it's not always just blatant lying, but it is sugarcoating. It's some degree of what I'll say is gaslighting. Actually, this comment here from LinkedIn, I'll pull up here related to this. When the vendor fails, the customer is always the problem in some way. Not enough money spent, wrong team to implement, et cetera. This is a big one too. I actually have a video. I can't remember if it came out yet or not on LinkedIn or on YouTube, but it's about, I think it comes out next week. It's about how vendors in the tech industry have this tendency to gaslight their own customers and say, hey, look, you're the problem. The technology works great. I mean, obviously, look, we're SAP, we're Oracle, we're Microsoft, we're awesome, right? So we're not the problem. You clearly are the problem. You don't have enough people on this. Your people resisted the change. Which, by the way, it could be that the software sucks. Maybe that's why the people resisted change. I don't know, just a thought. But that's never a consideration to the software vendors. A lot of times they're like, no, you're resisting change. You don't adapt clean core, fit to standard, blah, blah, blah. Best practices, whatever you want to call it. So that all, so it's not just blatant lying. It's not just blatant crisis management. Let's shut down Emma and Eric. It's also other more subtle gaslighting tactics too that I think are maybe even more harmful than what we're talking about here today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here with Emma Roloff. We're talking about the dark side of the technology industry and how it tends to silence voices of dissent. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola. C-O-L-A.
If you're leading a digital transformation or ERP initiative and you want to avoid the costly mistakes that most organizations make, that's where Third Stage Consulting comes in. We are an independent and technology advisory firm, meaning that we don't sell software, we don't take commissions from vendors. Our only job is to protect your interests and be on your side. We help executives and project teams plan, deliver, and recover digital transformations and ERP projects, reducing risk, improving adoption, and delivering real business value. If you want clarity before you commit to your digital strategy, or if something feels off track to you, feel free to reach out to us at thirdstage-consulting.com, and my team and I would be happy to help.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 266. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com, and this show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. If you'd like to learn more about how Third Stage can help you with your digital transformation initiative, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to check out some of our resources and thought leadership. You can find links to all that stuff in the show notes below. We're here with Emma Roloff. We're talking about how the tech industry has a tendency to silence those who speak the truth. So let's jump back into the conversation.
In that scenario, there's like three entities in my mind, right? There's the executive team that's like able to make these decisions that are often the ones that get stuck in this FOMO cycle and feel like, and like this, I have a lot of like people that I respect very highly that are in these executive roles that are making these decisions. And sometimes I talk to them and they're like, the pressure to like do this or what's coming from our board, like they are not immune from the pressures of other people just because they have a high up title. And they have the same fears associated with like losing their job if they don't do what they're told to do, or they're not like aggressive enough with moving the company forward from an innovative perspective. So this is me not dumping on executives, but saying like they are the ones that often get stuck in that FOMO cycle, but they're the ones that have the power to make the decisions. Then there's like the software vendors and the consulting firms and the vendors that are brought in that are oftentimes causing that like fear and pressure, either through that mechanism of like, you know, adapt now or die, or by getting that message to the board, which puts pressure on those executives. And then there's like the team down here, and everything seems to roll down to the team because they're the people that don't have any real decision-making power unless they've got an executive who's giving them a voice. And like, you have to kind of like break down the structures that are in that place and create like actual communication between the team and the executives that are driving those decisions, or the people that are buying the solutions and choosing the partnerships. And that's like the real solution to this, is actually creating bi-directional feedback and communication between the executives and the team. Because I actually made a video right before we got on about like the give a mouse a cookie video. Someone was like, it's almost like this is preventable. There's like 2 things that you need to do to prevent this whole thing from happening if you're an executive. And that's spending the time to build digital literacy, to understand what's going on with these tools and not just blindly believe all of the promises.
Yeah.
Spend 2 hours digging into it, and you can figure out where AI is really well situated and where it still has opportunity, and where investing in it is going to make sense and where it's fake promises. And then you go and you talk to your team and you say, where do you have real problems? And then if you have the knowledge of where AI actually fits and where it's going to add value, and you talk to your team and they're like, man, this problem's keeping us up at night, and that matches up with where there's actual potential, then you're still innovative, you're still moving forward, you're still making do on the pressure that's coming down from the board or whoever else, but you're doing it in a way that's meaningful. And it's 2 steps. All you needed to do was take 2 steps and slow down with that level of intentionality, and it changes the entire game.
Yeah, but why is that so difficult? Like, what? It is so simple, but it's not, you know, like to organizations, apparently it's not, because they don't do it very often. So why do you think that is?
I think there's a little bit of arrogance.
Yeah.
In a lot of scenarios where, and I've had these conversations, now these are not necessarily the executives that I think super highly of, but I've had conversations with people where I'm like, you know, this is simple. Talk to your team. And they're like, yeah, you know, and the example, it is like somebody gave them all a book and they read it. And this is the example that they keep coming back to, but they're like, you know, it's kind of like the Henry Ford thing. Like if you ask them what they want, they're going to want a faster horse, but really like we want to give them a car. And it's like, okay, well then to me, that's a signal that you haven't done the job of giving your team either the resources or the space for them to build their own digital literacy, or you're hiring really bad people. Like either one of those are kind of bad leadership components. And that's not, again, it's not their problem. That's a you problem if you look in the mirror. And if you give people the space to learn about the technology, and you give them the space to tell you what you think, that what they think you should be doing, I promise there's going to be some really great ideas that come out of it. And I promise that there will be things that you would have never even thought of because you're not the one doing the work every single day. But it's this like arrogance that like, because I have that like knowledge, or I'm the one that's at these conferences, I'm the one that the big 4 consulting firms are coming to give a briefing on all of this, I'm the one with that knowledge. And it's like, well, no, but like, then give that knowledge to your team and work together as a team instead of keeping them on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how something that simple, you can learn so much from your own people, you know, not just the conferences, not just the vendors or the big consultants or whatever. Very interesting. So Doug on LinkedIn says, hey, Emma Roloff, you got a fan there. Someone on LinkedIn says PowerPoint is a weapon of choice for promoting FOMO. I totally agree with that. All decisions are personal based on how good they will look in the end for making it. Another interesting, I think there's a lot of kind of like what you're saying. There's some ego and arrogance and all that stuff that goes along with it, the vanity.
There's one other piece that this just kind of how good it'll make them look at the end. That is an interesting topic that comes up in my comments a lot. And it's on tenure of executives now, and specifically the tenure of technology executives shrinking. So since COVID timeframe or a little before, we've seen this compressing of the tenure of how long technology leadership is in a company and just how long executives are within a company. And I've looked it up in the past. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think it's less than 3 years on average for any executive to be in a leadership position within a company now. And I think it's 2.5 or something like that for technology leaders. I'll go into the comments and I'll add it later. I'll go back and find it. But the 10-year time frame is shrinking. And so what a lot of people have been saying in my comments is well, yeah, you have to go and implement a shiny object, and you don't have time to do any of that intentional adoption side, because all they care about is hitting the go live date, and then they're going to use that to launch to the next position. Or they're brought in because they're cloud first, and they've got to be cloud first before the next company needs them to go be cloud first, because the second they're cloud first, their company is going to become AI first, and they're no longer the CIO to do it. Right. And so it's this race to try and do it as quickly as possible so that they can bounce to the next role, as opposed to truly investing in the success of the company. And that a lot of people feel like their executives are really kind of focused on their own success and bouncing quickly rather than the success of the company.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. I hadn't heard that stat, but it matches what seems to be happening in the industry, and that it makes sense. It makes you wonder if these are really sustainable companies. Is it more of a shallow shell or a house of cards or something that's being built by some of these executives? Deja says she's hitting the nail on the head on LinkedIn, so thank you for that. And then Ryan on LinkedIn has a comment here. The shiny object is key. It's the idea that shifts a company from focusing on what they actually need and what their strategy is to instead focusing on implementing the technology and trying to figure out how to make that fit tool versus business strategy. This is a really good point, because it happens all the time in these big projects. It becomes you get so myopically heads down on just how do I get this technology to work? And I've got to figure out all these cool bells and whistles and the end-to-end workflow. And it's even for our own team, sometimes it's hard to come up for error and look around and say, wait, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to implement this module over here that doesn't seem to work? And, and what ends up happening is you end up powering through because, someone will tell the executives oh, your people are resisting change, or this is just a normal part of the process. Don't worry. But sometimes we look at that and say, no, actually, that's a showstopper. That is going to shut down your operations if you don't figure that out and figure out a better way than what you're doing right there. But you just get so hell-bent on implementing the shiny object that you don't stop to think, do we need the shiny object? Is it actually harming us more than it's helping?
So I don't know if you've seen the report that Anthropic released recently, and they asked 81,000 people around the world for their opinions on AI and what they're looking for AI to do. And it's burned into my brain. I haven't made it through the entire report yet, but when you go to the report, it brings up a bunch of different quotes. And you can actually go in and say, I want quotes on AI in North America and what people are looking for. There's some fascinating stuff there to begin with. And we could dive into that in a whole nother conversation. But the first quote that came up from the US and North America was, we found a unicorn and we're using it to pull a cart. Oh, and it was this idea that everybody is so desperate to find a use case for AI right now, right, that we're just shoving it in places and being it's magic. And it's I don't need it for email subject lines. That's not where AI is helpful for me. Now, this again, and Eric, you and I have had this conversation. Sometimes people will say, and I think maybe even you said it to me one time, I know how you feel about AI. And it's well, no, I like AI. I think it's a really powerful tool. I've been selling, I sold it for 10 years. Before it was fashionable and I had to explain to people what AI actually was. Right. It is an incredibly valuable tool pointed in the right direction with the right problem to solve. But the moment that ChatGPT hit the market in beta, by the way, which is like, you know, one of the first times that we ever saw that happen at a massive scale. Then everybody pushed their products in beta, and everybody pushed it just for the sake of keeping up. And then all of the cascade of the FOMO happened, and now everybody wants to find a use case. But when I talk to people about like where they're using it, it's typically like, yeah, we've been told to experiment with it, and we have a dashboard that keeps track of how often we're using Copilot. It's like, but why? And they're like, yeah, they haven't told us. They're just hoping someone will figure out where it is. And so it's like all of these scenarios where they're like shoving AI in to try and help, but that's not necessarily the right solution or even a needed solution in those scenarios. Whereas like maybe going out and looking for a point solution that solves a very specific problem is a good place for you to start experimenting with it, or using it on the back end to manage massive amounts of data and those types of things. Good use cases there. And we like again, kind of going back to where people said they wanted it in North America, it was all tied to the health system. It was all tied to people wanting better outcomes there. So yeah, use it there. Find ways to like improve, client and customer experience in the healthcare system, or patient experience in the healthcare system. There's all sorts of places where people are clamoring for that, but shoving AI into everybody's face to like generate images, that's not adding value to society.
Right.
We don't need any more crappy images on the internet. They already exist in plenty.
Yeah, the AI slop, I think is what it's called, or often referred to. That's super interesting. And I know you're not against AI, but you're against AI first, or the myopic, like we are an AI first driven company.
Mm-hmm.
You poke fun at that.
Oh yeah, I hate that saying, but that I will go down saying AI for anything first.
Yeah.
Besides people, I really can't get behind,
but you have to follow the money. Why is that? Why are they saying AI first? It's because the investors are rewarding companies that are claiming to be AI first, or claiming to use AI because they think that's going to make them more scalable, more profitable long term. So now executives are getting comped to become AI first. So therefore, they're going to drive the organizations to be AI first, even if they don't fully understand or can't articulate what that means. And so I think that's what we have to look at too. Or
they're pushing use cases to be AI first, and they're pissing off their customers.
Yeah.
Like the amount of videos I've seen of people interacting with voice agents that are AI, and, being like, at first you wouldn't realize this is AI until you ask like cascading questions. And then all of a sudden, going back to this gaslighting idea, then all of a sudden it start like these AI agents will like kind of try to gaslight people into believing that they're humans. And, then there's people out there like videotaping them interacting with it, trying to trick it. And then there's like a whole PR crisis because instead of looking for a spot where it adds value, they shoved it in a spot where their customers don't want it. And that's what happens when you put technology above people and customers and employees. If you listen to your customers, they don't want to talk to an AI agent for 90% of what, like if they're picking up the phone, it's because they didn't want to interact with your bot online. Don't give them a bot on the phone. It's going to piss them off.
Yeah, we're still paying the price for the big IVR movement of like 25 years ago, where like the automated voice response thing. I mean, that was such a disaster when it was rolled out in the late 90s. And it's still a disaster today in many ways. But yet here we are, we're still dealing with that same crap where technology is in some ways making things worse.
Yeah.
And speaking of people and impacts of technology on people, I'm going to get to some more audience questions because a ton of them are coming in. But I want to share this one thing with you. And this is something I've told you about, Emma, and I haven't shared it with you yet. I have a redacted version against my attorney's advice. I'm going to show this letter.
It's redacted, right?
It's redacted. So hopefully that calms them down a little bit.
No, you're going to get another phone call from the lawyer,
yes,
Eric.
Exactly.
Be careful.
What exactly are you doing here? But I do want to share it because it's worth unpacking this, because I just want, you and I can share our case studies, our horror stories, examples, but seeing it in writing is somehow, to me, more jarring. And so this is a letter I got based on this. I'll give some context here. This all started with a CBS News segment out of Chicago, where someone contacted me from CBS News and said, can we interview you about this big, massive government-related ERP failure? And I said, yes, absolutely. So I was on the news, and it was a big segment, in a big market, basically calling out one of the local government agencies for their failure, and it involved a certain well-known technology vendor. So I followed that up with a YouTube video where I talk about the angle of the video wasn't just, hey, look at this project that failed. It was, look at this project that failed and look how it affected people. Like, look how it affected normal everyday citizens. And so instead of, asking to clarify what I meant, or maybe, a lot of times vendors will send me an email saying, hey, I saw you did this video about us, but I just want to share with you some new things we're doing to improve. Sort of like what you said you would do in sales. You would sort of, rather than just ignoring it or deny it, you would actually say, well, here's what we're doing differently going forward. And that, to me, that's fair. I think that's a good conversation to have. But instead, what this firm did is they stuck their attorneys on me. And let me see if I can get to the document here. So this is where they sent me a letter here basically asking me to take the video down. And what's really interesting is you read through this, and as you read through this, you start to think, first of all, I want to point out this thing right here. They talk about that I misrepresent basic facts in a 6-minute video. I'm sure you'd want to correct as, quote unquote, the most recognized and respected independent ERP systems expert in the world, given blah, blah, blah. So they're basically like not gaslighting, but they're sort of saying, you think you're so smart, but you're not. That's the way I read that. And then here it says your mistakes include, but are not limited to, and then they go on to, they nitpick the way I said things. And I was intentionally vague in the video. I wasn't very clear about it involved this case of so-and-so versus so-and-so filed in this district court in this date. I didn't go to that level of detail. I said there is litigation pending about whatever. And I was talking about the general aspect. And my whole point was this, that there were people that were affected and were paid. The vendor had to pay these citizens for damages caused by the technology. And they go into this, and you read this and you think, wow, it sounds like you did have your facts wrong. But our attorney went through it and responded line by line and said, no, actually, he was right. And by the way, what you're saying in this letter is not what I said in the video. So they took my words and actually changed some of my words in this letter and changed what I said. That's like half of this here is not what I said, but yet they said I said it, and therefore I was wrong. Really strange and bizarre. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but this is the fun part right here. For these reasons, we demand you immediately take down your video. By the way, I got this letter right in that week between Christmas and New Year's. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry. First of all, I'm not even going to think about this. I'm not going to put any brain space into this over the holidays. Second of all, I'm just not going to take the video down. I never did. It's still up. So they give me like 3 days to take the video down. And then they look at this last little dig at the end. Going forward, we expect that you will work to at least present these objectives facts correctly. Your clients are not well served otherwise. So just a really snarky message here from their internal chief administration officer and their chief legal officer. And look, here's the key right here. VP of corporate communications. I imagine that's where the letter originated. I'm sure this VP of corporate communications went to their legal counsel and said, is there any way we can get this guy to shut the hell up?
But you said it was all started from CBS, like reaching out to you. They didn't send this to CBS. And that, I think, goes back to the conversation of social media being a little bit of a scary place for brands, because they're not going to go to the news outlet and say that stuff the same way that they did to you. And clearly they didn't have like actual grounds to get the video taken down because it's March and it's still there. Yeah. So they were just hoping that would spook you. Right. Yeah. It
is intimidating, right? To get even your thing that you showed me, it's like, taken down for copyright. Yeah. It's just like, oh my gosh, I broke the law. Am I going to get sued? You start to worry about all these things. And I guess it's happened enough to me now that I don't get too worried about it. And whatever, if someone wants to sue me, they will, and I'll defend myself.
I like the comment, perhaps they used AI to produce the letter.
Oh, that's funny. That's pretty funny. Yeah. And so what's funny is they never responded back to our attorney. Our attorney sent a letter a couple weeks later. They never responded. So I don't know if that goes away or not, but what's great about it is when I got the letter, I was actually a little bit excited because I thought this is going to make for great content. Now I've got this letter and I actually went to my attorney and said, okay, while you're drafting this response, I'm going to go ahead and use this in social media. And they're like, no, please don't. And so
that's like, I thought about what it means to have them have gone through that process. And like, I did post about it, and I did redact the name. I didn't want people like going after the firm, whatever. That woman who did it was doing her job. But I did like make a post about it, and a lot of people were commenting like, well, like you've reached a point where you're getting to them. Like the conversation's making enough noise that they want you to take it down. So like, don't stop, keep going, was like the message that I overwhelmingly got in the comments, and a handful of people that like sent me DMs afterwards seeing it. And I think that is evidence to the topic that we kind of started with, of like, is the transparency needed? Yes. Is there a space where these conversations, or should there be a space where these conversations happen? Yes. Does me saying like, be careful, I don't agree with the way that the big four consulting firms implement this, mean that they've never been successful? Absolutely not. They clearly have a use case and a time and a place. And actually recently I told somebody that they should probably call one of them for a situation based off of like what they needed in the room.
Right.
But the blind following of like that, again, new shiny object, bring in the big consulting firms that are experts, even though it's a brand new technology. I'm going to just trust that they've given their team what they need to upskill, and that they're going to be the best served to implement AI for us. But then on the back end, you see videos of people that work there that are like, I have like unreasonable billable goals, and I'm also supposed to be self-teaching on AI to be able to give all of this guidance. Like, I'm probably not best suited to do that. Like, listen to that transparency that's coming out and use it as information to make intentional decisions. And I think going back to like what my mission is, and I made a video about this the other day, my social channels are not meant to be anti-corporate or anti-software or anti-big four, anti-AI. It's literally to try and say, let's bring some nuance back to the conversation, and let's bring gray back into the world so that people can recognize it's not all good. It's not magic. It's not all bad. But like, where do we find the right use cases to build the future that we want? That future gets built from intentional leadership and like clarity of vision, as opposed to implementing solutions in search of problems. Yeah. And the better that we can get at infusing that intention into leadership in the digital world, the more successful our outcomes are going to be, and the more we're going to get to use technology to kind of shape the world in the direction we want it to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay to ask why, I think there's a perception that by asking why, and I'm not only talking about why, like you talk about a lot, the why of digital transformation, that's super important, obviously, but even going down another layer to like, why would we implement that module? Why would we use a big four consulting firm? Why would we use AI? Like, and a lot of times people would view that like, what do you mean why? Why are you questioning it? AI is the future. Or, I for a long time got so much heat in this industry for questioning cloud. Like, why are people moving to the cloud? I still question it. Like, why are we doing this? Oh, it's because the vendors make so much money off it, and the big four consulting firms and. So there's a lot of money chasing the cloud. That's why. That's not a good reason for you, the organization, to be implementing. It may make sense for you, but you should absolutely ask why. You still may land in the same spot. That's okay. But if you by asking why, you have to be critical. We all have to be critical thinkers, but we've lost that ability.
Well, and I think it's so important too to recognize that when you ask why, it helps you remove yourself from the pendulum shift about the market, right? Like, everybody's on the cloud. Everybody needs to move to cloud. This is the only option. You need to be doing it. What do you mean you're not cloud first? Well, one, that's no longer like the biggest conversation, because now everybody is shifted over here to talk about AI first. But then in this shift of moving towards AI first, all of a sudden we're seeing like pretty massive outages from the main cloud computing companies that are out there, partially because they're trying to over leverage AI. And so like, had you been thoughtful about your approach and made sure that like mission critical applications that are going to give you massive amounts of downtime aren't necessarily hosted in those environments, but maybe you have your own like infrastructure for that, and then you cloud host other things. Like, just because you're not cloud first doesn't mean you can't take advantage of the technology that's available to you. It means that you're taking yourself out of that pendulum swing and thinking about what makes sense for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a comment from Jim on LinkedIn. Says, this is really good. The missing link needs to be a leadership and behavior component. I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here is like, as leaders of internal organizations that are going through digital transformations, I think it's important to understand this lack of transparency and the need for more transparency and more gray, more nuance, all the stuff you're talking about, Emma. That's the whole point of this conversation, is like not to just complain, although it's fun to complain about attorneys that send letters and get videos taken down and stuff like that. It's interesting, but the real story here is, what do we do about it as leaders? Well, what you do about it as leaders is you demand transparency. You ask the questions, you dig into, a Big Four consulting firm. Let's just say Big Four is right for you, for example, and they want to put 50 people on your project starting tomorrow. Then you may not be asking, why are we hiring this firm? But you may say, why do we have 50 people showing up tomorrow to start billing full time when we haven't even gotten our team in place? That's a fair question that every organization should ask, but most of them are afraid because the Big Four consulting firm says urgency is important, speed, velocity. Your competitors are getting ahead. We need to get going now if you want to hit that time. They're all pushing you to go fast, but it's okay to stop and say, wait, why though? Why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm. And I think you just hit on, so I was listening to a podcast from Harvard Business Review the other day, and I'm sorry to the man, I don't have his name off the top of my head, but they had the previous previous CEO of the Project Management Institute on. And his hot take was that executive leaders aren't doing what they need to lead projects. And that's actually the problem. And that when you look at companies to this extent, like, do they have the intellectual capacity to be contrarian and ask why and push back and think through the nuance and be intentional? Or do they have 25 projects that they're managing, and one of them that's the most mission critical, they're going to pay the most and they're going to hand it off to someone that they think can take it? Right. And if that's the case, and you've got a load of being the executive sponsor over 25 projects, there is no way that you can be actively involved in enough of those projects in a meaningful way to lead them. And so he was saying, like, 5 max. Like, right. He's like, you should not be on anything more than 5. And it shouldn't be, I spend an hour on this project a month. That's not executive sponsorship. That's not leadership. And if you are doing that, then you're not giving it then it's not a priority. And he was basically saying, like, we need to get much better at the leadership level of actually setting priorities and acting as if the things that we say are priorities by giving them the time and the attention that we need. Right. And that you could tell the Harvard Business interviewer, I'll throw that into the comments after we get off, was like, ooh, like, you're kind of coming in hot with this. But it was like, at listening, it's like, oh, yeah, that tracks. That's actually, he's saying the quiet part out loud. Yeah. So we can add him to our crew. Maybe he'll get a cease and desist soon too.
I know he's probably already gotten one. Maybe that's why he's talking about it. But here's a comment from LinkedIn: legal opinion trolls are the new legal patent trolls. I think that's an interesting thought, because I get those a lot too. Like, hey, there's a patent, you have some image on your website that you need to pay $3,000 to continue using, or something like that, even though it's not open source, but what's it called?
Stock image,
yeah, the free stuff. But oh yeah, this is fun. This is from YouTube, from Dimitri on YouTube. Your apology videos to ERP and consulting firms aren't enough. So thank you for watching my sarcastic apology videos where I apologize to the industry for calling them out. I'll probably do another one based on this conversation here
today.
There you go. Yeah, and here's the comment you were mentioning before, Emma. Lean on LinkedIn said perhaps they used AI to produce this letter. And then here, Lean also said, like the quote, "We have a solution, let's find a problem," is the case. That's something that's very common. So I guess just to wrap this all up, Emma, what closing parting advice would you leave for leaders in the industry, as well as what closing advice would you leave for the other side of the industry, the vendors, the consultants, the sales reps, the Big Four? What's 2 sets of advice would you give for each of those 2 parties as it relates to transparency, visibility, all the stuff we're talking about here today?
The closing thought, and I went on a big rant about this for leadership, and this is what I take on my roadshow on every stage that I'm at. Leading change doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It can be pretty simple, and it comes down to having a clear vision of where you want to take your company, a good communication strategy that's actually bi-directional with your team so that you can get feedback from them on how to shape things in a way that's going to be meaningful and drive adoption for them. and then celebrating small wins and like highlighting where you're getting the benefit of the vision and that communication and implementing as you go along. Those 3 things don't solve all of the people problems, but they break down a lot of what we're talking about today. They interrupt the FOMO cycle, and they give you the space to be intentional to make sure that you're bringing in solutions to solve real problems. So like from a leadership perspective, this is preventable and it's relatively easy to prevent. You just have to stop and look back at your team and actually treat them like teammates.
Right.
From the vendor side, I mean, I lost some deals by being transparent and not telling people exactly what they wanted to hear at all times. But I also had boomerang deals where I chose to be honest and they went with someone else and they boomeranged back to me because they learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And my customers that I built relationships off of transparency with, we were able to work through problems when they occurred quicker because we knew how to navigate that like process and actually interact and communicate with one another in a constructive way, because not every implementation I did was like all sunshine and roses. Like I'm not delusional in that capacity, but as a vendor, the more that you can do to be transparent and share the truth with people through your sales cycle and keep that line of like transparency and communication throughout, the better outcomes you're going to have. And I think a lot of times, this is one little like nugget of advice that I got from our old COO at my old job. Information is not good or bad. Information is information, but if you hold on to it and don't give it because you're afraid of what the response is going to be, you turn it into bad news. And a lot of times during implementations or during sales cycles or whatever else, we try to like hinder certain types of information because we think it's bad. If you're transparent with it, it gives you the opportunity to work through it and prepare based off of the information that you have. But if you hold stuff or you try to hide things or you keep it back, it becomes bad news or bad information down the line. So the more that you can do through that sales process and in those working relationships to be honest and upfront, the better outcomes you have and the more business you end up bringing in the long run anyhow.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that. That's a great point. I hadn't thought of a lot of this from that perspective, but one thing that came to mind too is that, you know, this industry right now is, in my opinion, in my career at least, I would consider it at an all-time high in the level of distrust that there is between end customers and software vendors and consultants. And I think the more you can be honest and transparent, it's almost like a ray of light in a very dark setting.
Yeah, you're the lighthouse then.
Yeah, and like suddenly I trust you and I'm going to spend more money with you because you're different. I can actually trust you. You admitted that you were wrong, or you admitted that your company failed or that your company screwed up. And most people won't do that, but the fact that you did means I can trust you. And that's such a huge valuable currency in this space right now that I'm finding like our company is benefiting from a third stage because we're independent, we're agnostic, we don't sell software, so people trust us. And that trust is like, that's what we're offering. Our service offering is not because we're super smart or because we put out cool YouTube videos or whatever. It's the fact that you can trust us. And so I think the more that sales reps can do what you were doing, the more success. And it sounds like you were very successful. I know you did well in the space. It's not like I mean, I'm sure in the short term, there were times you lost deals, you paid the price, like you said, but long term, it sounds like you probably I would imagine you ended up ahead of if you would have just played the game and lied all along. Yeah.
And I could sleep better at night.
Yeah, well, and you've got young kids and you're raising a family, you know, you've got to be thinking about like, what kind of example am I setting for my family and all that stuff too. So you're at that point in life too, where I imagine that's even more important. But it's important for us all not to lose sight of that wherever we are in life or our careers or whatever. So, well, thank you for being here again. I really appreciate it. You are going to be part of our upcoming Digital Stratosphere conference again later this year, but so keep an eye out for that in September in Denver. A Digital Stratosphere conference, but you're also hosting a conference and you also have a forthcoming or a book you're writing. Tell us a little bit about those two things before we wrap up here, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So actually the week after I'm hanging out with you guys, we are putting on our second Ignite Digital Leadership Conference. And so I mentioned earlier that a lot of what we focus on is this concept of digital leadership. And that's how do you lead teams successfully internally and build authority in the market to generate revenue, and how those two ideas, along with personal growth, kind of all come together to help prepare what we're calling like really the new generation of leadership. We desperately need people that are willing to step into true leadership roles rather than kind of being these followers that fall into the FOMO cycle, that fall into these traps that we've been talking about today. So the conference is focused both on leadership as well as external authority, content creation, and how to share your knowledge and your expertise out with the world. So Eric joined us for our first event, and I hope you would agree with me when I say it had a little bit of a different vibe in terms of networking and really like building an intentional space for people to build relationships and get comfortable with the idea of stepping outside of their comfort zone is really what the focus of that is. So that will be September 3rd in Madison, Wisconsin. And then shortly on the heels of that, I don't have an actual publication date, but we're working through the manuscript right now. My husband and I, James, are co-authoring a book on the concept of digital leadership. So it'll be breaking down what internal, external, and personal kind of growth and leadership look like, and the different components that kind of play into this concept of how to step into a leadership role and not fall into being a follower disguised as a leader. So a lot kind of bringing all of my experience on the enterprise technology and change management side together with the work that we're doing, helping companies build external authority and generate revenue. So really looking at how all of that comes together and how we've been able to help our clients really embody this digital leadership concept.
Very cool. Do you have a title for that book yet, or a name for it yet?
So I actually have a meeting after this to start talking through finalizing it. But it will be something tied to the concept of digital leadership and how to be a leader in a world full of followers.
Nice. Well, that's cool. I'm excited to read it and see it, and I'll ask for your autograph when it comes out.
Well, I've got my signed copy of your last book around here, so I expect the next one as well.
Exactly. You'll definitely get a copy. And yeah, my book will be out in April, called Welcome to the Machine. It's about all the stuff we're talking about here today, the way the industry works, the way it's rigged, the way it's wired, all that stuff. And again, just in the spirit of understanding it so you can navigate it. So I'm excited for your book, though. It's about time you wrote one. I think you're long overdue for it. So I'm glad to hear you're doing that. So
it's a lot of work, though. Gosh, Eric, I third one in. I don't know how. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but we're excited for it.
Well, thank you. That was a great conversation, Emma. Thank you to the audience for the great questions. There's a lot of great discussion there, a lot of stuff we didn't get to, but we're going to come back from a break and build on some of those questions here in just a moment. We're also going to get into the topic of what every leader needs to know about cloud ERP. So be sure to stick around. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground.
I'm Greg Benton. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Third Stage Consulting. And if you are embarking on your digital transformation journey or in the middle of that journey in 2026, you're going to want to see our digital transformation report. This latest edition really dives into a lot of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace and the ecosystem right now. It also highlights a number of the things that are happening with AI being an important component and integral part of the ERP systems that are leading the way right now. Also, the shift toward composable and best-of-breed cloud solutions is really accelerating the decline of monolithic ERP replacement. The opportunity to download the report is found at thirdstage-consulting.com. And you'll also find other tools that will help you in the initiatives and the business planning that you're doing for 2026. Don't leave phase zero without it. Reach out today.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 266. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, we just had Emma on the show again. I think this is probably her third or fourth time on the podcast. Always a great, energetic conversation that she brings to the table. But this topic was a lot different than other conversations we've had with her or any other guest for that matter. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that?
Yeah, what an interesting conversation. I mean, obviously, you guys have unique experiences and different things you guys are experiencing on the lashback from your posts, which I feel like a lot of people probably don't know is happening. So it's always nice to show that it's happening to not just you, but also other people out there. And I think it just goes back to, like, I think for me, when you see people take things down on the internet or on social media because of something that they don't like, it almost makes the problem bigger than what it would have been if they don't take it down, because it makes them look a little more guilty, right? Because they're not wanting it out there. So I found that super interesting as well, that companies and then celebrities, you see the same kind of behavior happening across the board of PR, crisis PR, agencies taking down posts, and it's the same result kind of every time of people just being like, yeah, this now becomes a bigger topic of conversation because now you did take my post down and all those different things. So I found that really interesting as well. But I have a couple of questions to dive into with you, Eric, on the conversation. One being on why this is such a big thing. So when did you start asking, why did become something organizations avoid talking about?
Well, I don't know when it started. I mean, I think it's been as long as I can remember in this industry. So at least 25 or 30 years. But I think the reason for it is been the same. And that is there's too much money at stake. I mean, these are one thing Em and I did not talk about is I talked about the follow the money concept of you've got to follow the money, and why companies are so hell bent on pursuing AI first strategies or cloud first strategies. It's because that's where the money is. There's so much money at stake. And the thing with enterprise technology investments is they're huge dollar amounts with huge amounts of commission potential to an individual sales rep, huge amount of profit potential to a company. So there's just a lot at stake. And you see a lot of, if you break this down and look at the individual level, if you look at a sales rep who's trying to meet his or her numbers for the year, and in a lot of cases, one deal is all they need. And one deal, one big multi-million-dollar contract is the difference between making a ton of money in commission versus getting fired. And so when you have that sort of pressure and that high stakes pressure on you as a sales rep, you don't want this truth. This does not help the cause of me making this potentially 7-figure commission check on this deal. It doesn't help to have Darian or Eric or Emma or whoever coming out questioning, bringing up risks and talking about things that could go wrong. I need to focus on the positive, and I need to convince this person, the sales or this potential client, that everything's okay. And if they buy my solution, everything's going to be great. And that way I can collect my commission. So there's a very short-term myopic view that individual sales reps have. And there's also a lot at stake at an individual level. And now all of a sudden, so that's just one sales rep. You take that times however many thousands of sales reps at a software vendor, it rolls up to a CEO who is making millions of dollars, plus or minus millions of dollars, based on how well they can convert more cloud customers, sell more software, et cetera, et cetera. You can see there's just mass amounts of money that drive really irrational and in many cases unethical behavior. So I'm not saying it's okay. It's understandable. It's not okay, but it's understandable why this happens. We just have to dissect and reverse engineer the way the system is built so that we can navigate our way through that, knowing that we're not going to change that. You and I are not going to change that with this podcast. everyone here listening, even if we all join forces, we're not going to change that anytime soon. So we can either sit here and complain about it, or we can expose it and give people a roadmap for how to navigate it. And that's really the whole reason or the whole rationale for wanting to have that conversation.
Absolutely. And I have one more question to kind of follow up on that. I think another thing that you guys mentioned was trust kind of seems like it's at an all-time low right now between vendors and clients and everything like that. What specifically do you think caused that shift? Is it because of these huge commissions and just the lying, or maybe not telling full truths, like only telling half the truth? What do you think caused that big trust shift?
That's a great question. I've never really thought about it, but my knee-jerk reaction to it is I think the reason why the distrust is so high right now is because, first of all, there's nothing really different that's happening. It's the same thing. The difference, though, is that the cycles are going faster. So like when I started in the late 90s, the cycle happening at the time was the Y2K upgrade rush. So in my opinion, software vendors created a certain amount of fear that was unfounded, that if I don't upgrade my systems by the year Y2K, all the computers are going to crash because they were hard coded with a 2-digit year, not a 4-digit year. So when the clocks all hit year 2000, it's going to show a 00, and the code's all going to crap out. Just systems are going to shut down and the world is going to end. I mean, there was like that massive amount of panic that like banks aren't going to work. We're not going to be able to have electricity. There's all these fears that you look back and think, okay, there was not a single blip in Y2K, not a single one, which tells me that it was probably overstated, because I guarantee that not 100% of organizations throughout the world all upgraded perfectly on time and navigated that. I think it was unfounded. So anyway, whether or not that's true is a different story. That's irrelevant. But the real story here is that the first cycle in the late 90s, that went on for like 10 years, call it maybe 15 years. The next cycle then was the cloud stuff that started maybe 10 years ago. And then that's been going now for a decade. And now it's AI, and AI is kicking in again. And now things are just in such a state of flux and turmoil that now I think the cycles are repeating so fast and fast enough now to where people are starting to say, wait a minute, hold on. You just told me that if I upgrade to cloud, everything would be fine and I'd be future proof, blah, blah, blah. Now you're telling me I've got to implement something new to get AI or whatever. So I think people are starting to see the repetition enough, and the cycles are speeding up enough to where people are saying, okay, I think I'm starting to understand what this industry is about. And I don't think buyers like what they're seeing in the industry. And now that they're starting to realize more of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because to your point, somebody could be at the same company, right, since the 90s, and they could have seen this cycle happening over and over again. So by the time AI hits, they're like, yeah, been here, heard this. Like, I don't want to sign a 5-year contract with you. So
yeah.
Lots of different.
One of the most telling stories I had that reinforced that point you just made is that we have a client that we're working with now. It's a very large construction company in the United States, and they were on a 10-year SAP implementation where they were implementing ECC, and they had this big business case they had built out 10 years ago that said, okay, by the time you go live with all these different systems, here's what the business value is, the ROI, et cetera, et cetera. So they hadn't even gotten through. They just finished the rollout like 2 or 3 years ago, and then SAP came back and said, okay, well, now that you're done with that implementation, now it's time to upgrade S/4HANA because ECC is obsolete. And it was the same sales rep. And so the guy was like, it was the same guy that sold us ECC and put this business case in front of us and told us, all the great ROI stuff we were going to get for years after our implementation. We just finished implementing 2 or 3 years ago, and he's already telling us that we have to upgrade S/4HANA now. And we haven't even had time to realize the business case from the first implementation. So that's just an example of where this one guy worked with the same sales rep and is like, okay, something's up here. Something doesn't smell right. And so I think, there's enough stories like that accumulating in the industry where I think you start to see through the machine that's being built.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting conversation today with Emma. I think it's different than anything you've ever had on the podcast before, which I found really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was a fun, different conversation, and audience had some really good questions too that took us in a lot of interesting directions. So I appreciate that. And we're going to shift gears a bit here and talk about cloud ERP and the cloud ERP reality check that every leader needs. This goes back and builds on actually what Em and I just talked about. The fact that we can all sit here and talk about how awesome the cloud is and how it's going to reduce internal infrastructure costs. It's going to make us future proof, get rid of technical debt, automatic upgrade cycles, all the cool stuff that cloud brings to the table. But unfortunately, as with every technology advancement, there is a dark side. There's a story here. And unfortunately, we have to be the bearers of bad news here to say we're going to share with you the but. Here's the downside risk of cloud computing and just what you need to know about it. And my goal here by sharing this clip with you is not to suggest to you or to convince you necessarily that cloud is wrong or bad, but just to say if you go with the cloud, know what the downside risks are, because all you've really done is you've exchanged one set of risks for a new set of risks. And so we need to understand what those new set of risks are so that you can go in with eyes wide open and figure out how you're going to navigate those. So with all that being said, let's roll the clip and then we'll come back and talk about some of the questions that come out of that.
Mid-market is where a lot of our clients are. A lot of them are high growth organizations that are either family owned, perhaps they've grown through acquisition or organic growth or some combination of all the above. And many of them are looking for ways to use technology to automate their business, to bring together information and business processes, and ultimately make themselves more scalable and more growth-oriented going forward. However, there are a lot of options to choose from in the marketplace if you're looking for different ERP software or different types of technology, such as AI or other emerging technologies to improve your business. So it can be overwhelming, it can be daunting to know what to think about and how to prioritize and what some of the pitfalls are. So what I decided to do is to attend a mid-market IT and ERP conference that's actually hosted by a company called Acumatica, and they're an ERP software provider for the mid-market. And I want to ask some of the people at this conference, in terms of the software vendor and customers and analysts, to understand what is it that it takes to be successful in the mid-market technology space, what are some of the pitfalls to watch for, and what are some of the trends to be aware of. So let's take a look at what some of the experts at this conference have to say. So looking forward the next 5 years, what are you most excited about when it comes to technology in the mid-market space?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it probably goes without saying that the hype today is all about an AI.
Right.
Data that's in an ERP is like core to a company. It's highly secure. And no one has ever implemented an ERP to let their data be out in the wild, or when you ask it a question or you're looking for something, you get something that it hallucinates. Every answer for an ERP has to be accurate, has to be exactly what you need. And so what's super interesting to me over the next 5 years is what will AI do in that construct?
I put it in two categories. There's definitely a verticalization trend. Customers want more and more specific tools that solve kind of a one end-to-end problem, and they want to know they can run their whole business on that technology. It's very different from enterprise, very different from small business. And now they're looking for the most modern technology in that space. This is AI-driven, it's data-driven, it's certainly built on SaaS and on our cloud. AI is the biggest trend, of course, and everybody says it. We think we're delivering AI in a very specific way. It's a very pragmatic, real-world use case AI system that solves day-to-day problems for customers, and that's what they're getting. They're seeing those tools in their product every day, every week, every month, and that's probably the single biggest tech trend you see on top of that verticalization I talked about.
The challenge I see is that mid-market companies, to take quote unquote advantage of AI, they need to do a lot of things with data and with industry specific data quality. That is a lot of work, and data architectures to get AI right are pretty complicated and difficult. And I think a lot of mid-sized companies are going to find they don't have the internal resources to maintain it. You have things like model drift. You have things like which LLM should we be using this week? That's a lot for a mid-size company that's trying to focus on kicking ass in their business world to deal with, not to mention things like tariffs and globalization and all of that. And a lot of these companies do play globally. What I'm excited about is there's a growing number of vendors, including, by the way, the one we're dealing with here, Acumatica, that are able to provide a lot of that stuff in a quote unquote out of the box capacity so that you don't have to invest as much, of your own development resources in there. AI is an accelerator. It makes your good stuff better. It makes your bad stuff worse. So let's embrace the good stuff and have that conversation.
Right. How does the average mid-market company or a small business, how do they navigate all these different advancements and all the cool stuff they could be doing when maybe they're on an old system that they can't even get the basic functionality they need in a current cloud system?
I think this is definitely one of a big problem for many of the companies in this space, because a lot of companies went to ERP many years back, and many of them are stuck in that, right? The whole idea is how to enable those customers such that they don't have to worry about where they are going, what they are needing. they have to worry about their business. They have to worry about how do they increase their business, how do they achieve the outcomes that they want to achieve. And it is our job to provide them the right tools and right technology so that they can leverage that.
One of probably the biggest mistakes I see is companies not starting with the end state of what they want on their business process. What they need to do is stop and think and say, what's the end state of my business process? What am I trying to get to? And many times those customers will start off with, well, this is the way we've done it all along, instead of this is what we should be doing. And that mistake is bringing your bad habits into your new system.
What piece of advice or thing would you say a lot of organizations overlook when they get involved in a mid-market technology initiative?
Yeah, I think technology initiatives for mid-market customers are an unknown because they maybe don't do one very often, or maybe there's a lot of fear or there's disruption. And I actually think the best thing to think about is the prep solves the problem. So in other words, being better at clarifying who your accounts are, what your data is, knowing what your goals are, deciding how much history you bring in, is the single biggest thing I see. And the pitfalls we see are often that they're not prepped for that. They haven't thought through all the eventualities, because they're not just buying software. They're actually buying a system that works, they can run their business on. They're running their old system at the same time. They want to know it's not just the technology's turned on. They want to know, is it ready? Are all my accounts updated? Do you understand my business? Are my people trained? Are we ready? And that degree of disruption is an unknown. And so we want to give them as much clarity and predictability as possible around that.
What are some of the advice or takeaways you would give to someone who's about to start evaluating potential ERP systems?
I would first make sure that they have a good plan, and set out all the goals for what they're trying to achieve. And then once we launched, we worked very hard to make sure that we didn't have any customizations or third-party add-ons right away. So it was important to use as much of the native operating system as possible, while focusing on making sure we eliminated as much of our double and triple entry that we had before. And so if you focus on that, I think you can have a successful implementation. And then after you get used to the system from there, then you can start seeing if you need customizations or third-party software to go along with it.
Right. The only thing I would add is that you need a really good project manager, someone who's going to take the whole thing all the way through.
So that's what some of the experts have to say about what to look forward to in the mid-market technology space. But I'd love to hear from you. What do you think? What are you most excited about as you think about mid-market technology? What trends are you most excited about? And where do you think we'll be in 5 years? Leave a comment below and let me know what you think.
So that was our YouTube clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about the cloud ERP reality check that every leader needs to know. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that, Darian?
Yeah, what a great video, I thought. I think overall, my main takeaway is that the AI accuracy problem in ERP is super interesting. So I think you mentioned something like ERP data is core to the company and highly secure. And every answer for an ERP has to be accurate. And that is exactly what you need. It kind of reframes the whole AI and ERP debate because of AI hallucinations and that risk, I think, that we're still all seeing. It's just a fundamental mismatch of like how ERP data has to function. So how can that integrate so well until AI is perfect, right? So I think that's something that's super interesting that stood out for me. But I have a couple of follow-up questions. One being, you mentioned kind of in that same piece that AI is accelerator and it can make your good stuff better and your bad stuff worse. So pointing to that data, if your data is bad, it can make your bad data even worse because it starts building on that. So what does the bad stuff look like in practice inside ERP transformation, and what processes are organizations running through that with AI that absolutely should not be, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I guess the first part of the question around the bad stuff that gets magnified with AI is going to be, you mentioned data. That's the obvious one. That's probably the biggest one. Is poor data, inaccurate data is just going to make your AI better at analyzing bad data, which you were probably already pretty good at that as an organization, and now AI just helped you do that better. Now, if you can clean up the data, you can convert that risk into a positive. But beyond that, there's also the usual risks that come with using AI on a personal level. You've got to validate what you're getting from AI. It's not always perfect. It's not always right. and it's oftentimes incomplete. And so just knowing, I think that's the hardest part of AI right now, is like knowing when and where to challenge it, because it's getting easier and easier over time as AI advances. It's getting easier to defer to the AI and assume that it knows what it's doing. And I think the best example that is a visual example is if you look at a lot of the AI slop that gets created, including sometimes in our own videos. You know, we have stock footage or B-roll footage that we'll use AI to create, like in some of our shorts. And yeah, I notice it too. I cringe every time I see it, but it happens sometimes where something will get through our QA cycle where it shows like a weird, you know, a person's hand with 6 fingers or like 2 thumbs or whatever, just weird stuff like that. That's not the end of the world, but it's just like, you think about it at a visual level, it's jarring, it stands out. But on an organizational level, it's doing the same thing. In some cases, it's creating hallucinations and inaccuracies with accurate data. So you just have to know and have the right governance and guardrails in place to be able to manage that. And that's the hard part. And that's that part of AI, I think, that's the least mature right now, is not the technology, it's the way companies govern it and have guardrails in place, or lack thereof, to support it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my last question that I have for you based on this video is, what is one thing that leaders at this conference said that surprised you? I mean, like, what's something that didn't fit your existing model of what's happening in the mid ERP market right now, in your opinion? Or yeah, just something that surprised you.
Well, I think it's a good question. I think, you know, the mid-market's always been interesting because they're sort of caught in the middle of a lot of good opportunities, but it can be overwhelming. You've got opportunities to go upstream or upscale with, you know, some of the bigger ERP technology providers. You can go downstream to some more niche-y focused solutions. And there's a lot in the middle. So I think the big thing is, it really isn't anything new. It's just more mid-market has to be more careful and deliberate at navigating all the different options they have, knowing that they have more options, which can lead you down a lot of detour paths that aren't good. So, you know, options are good. Optionality is generally a good thing, but when you don't know how to manage that optionality, it can actually work against you. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I have from the mid-market just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting. I loved all the topics that we chatted about today. I hope the audience did as well.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I appreciate you guiding us through that, and appreciate Emma being on the show. I appreciate the audience questions. You can find all the past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. If you'd like to subscribe on whatever platform you like to listen or watch, go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. We've aggregated all the platforms there in one place, so you can go find it. You can also keep an eye at that website to keep an eye out for future episodes. You can also subscribe to the podcast there as well. So check it out there. Be sure to check out Third Stage Consulting if you'd like to learn more resources or find more resources to help you through your transformation. Just go to thirdstage-consulting.com. You'll find a lot of good stuff there, a lot of good thought leadership to help guide you through your process. So hope you all have a great week. We'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Have a great week, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.